Hi, this is Lori with Pro Resources. We are going to discuss safety awareness and complete training on the Minnesota AWARE program, which I will explain in more detail. Today we just want to address that everyone has a role and a responsibility for safety. Of course, safety training can provide the guidelines, but whether it's stellar training or maybe not even the best training, ultimately the safety behavior is up to you. And so we want to make sure that you start developing good safety habits, and hopefully the guidelines will be there too, and the training to remind you to implement those habits. And that's when we have effective training and a good safety culture. And a good safety culture develops from everyone's combined efforts to help everyone have a better and safer workplace. Safety culture involves a number of elements. I'm not going to go through all of the details on this, but of course management has to have a commitment, which they do, allowing you to take time to invest in some safety training. One of the other keys is good communication, and that has to go from all directions. Of course, the training is an element in that. The communication coming from every aspect, and a good illustration of this is a scenario I had come across my desk regarding an investigation of an accident that had happened. And what they found was that an employee was working with a piece of electrical equipment, and in doing so he received a shock. It was malfunctioning, but he didn't report it. The next day another employee was working with the same equipment, and he also received a shock but didn't report it, and they didn't do anything about it. The third day another employee was working with the equipment and received a shock that was fatal. And certainly employee number 1 or employee number 2 have some regrets, just wondering, what if? Would Joe still be with us today if we had reported it and done something? It's not a for sure thing, of course, but we don't want to put anybody in that situation, and we want to make sure that we are dealing with good equipment. And of course management can't fix anything that they're not aware of, so the communication that something's not working, and then the trust that those things are going to be addressed and taken care of appropriately and timely, is a key element of a good safety culture. So why is safety important? 5 million work injuries, 1 in 18 workers. We'd like that to be even less, of course, and then even that one that happens, we want it to be a very minor injury. My cartoon graphic today, injury scheduled for today right after you fail to pay attention, because accidents are never planned. When I do an accident investigation, 9 times out of 10 I ask what had happened, and the person says, I just wasn't paying attention. A live example of that was somebody that walked into my office and had just gotten stitches across his right eyebrow, and asked what had happened, and he said, you know, I was walking across the shop floor talking to a coworker, and bam, that pole just jumped right out in front of me. Literally walked into the pole hard enough where he cut open his eyebrow and needed stitches. Not a huge expensive claim, certainly a nuisance claim, time away from work to get medical attention, etc. But what if it had been a forklift that he hit instead, or something more significant? You know, again, regardless of the cost, it was just a matter of not paying attention. It could have been totally eliminated. The other reason I get for accident investigations is I was in a hurry. So 2 behaviors that we can address, not paying attention and being in a hurry or rushing, that cause the majority of accidents. So we can certainly prevent those just by taking care of those few things. So my goals and objectives are 2, to decrease injuries, because there's a cost both potentially to the employee and to the company. Yes, even if you're missing work and you have work comp benefits available to you, it's not going to pay you the exact same as your paycheck. So there's a potential cost to you. And just as in your own auto insurance, if you have 3 car accidents in a year, your premiums are going to be going up. The same concept applies in workers' comp. So based on your employee history within your company, that's what their rates are. So that's a mandatory coverage that they have to pay. We want to decrease the potential cost and impact on that. Hopefully I can decrease injuries by increasing safety awareness. I can't be next to everybody every day and telling them to do their work in a safer manner. What I hope to do is increase your awareness so you think about how you're doing your work, and therefore you choose the right behaviors and the right habits to minimize your risk. This is one of my all-time favorite graphics. The little mouse being prepared to take that cheese. I've got my PPE, the personal protective equipment is his helmet. Now he's ready to go for the cheese. So you increase your safety awareness, you prepare, you can conquer those risks that way. So my goal with training is to do just that, to raise your awareness so that you perform your job in a safe manner. I'm oftentimes not teaching you something as simply reminding you of safe practices and why we do things the way that we do. However, I'm not going to be able to raise your awareness if you're not awake. Not awake, you're not aware. So I'll try to keep this as lighthearted, entertaining, thought-provoking as I can. I'll use this dry sense of humor that I have in a few cartoons. I'll also implement a few graphic photos. I will try and give you a warning if you don't like to look at those. I understand that, totally respect it. But it is a good way to grab people's attention and get them to think about what's at stake. So those are some things that I'll inject in the training periodically. If an injury does happen, because we do recognize that they do still occur, our first priority is, of course, your physical health and well-being. Get the medical attention as needed. And then, if the doctor gives you any restrictions after that, we want you to make sure you communicate that to your supervisor. It is the doctor's role to identify what's safe for you to do within the parameters of your injury. If you have a sprained ankle, what you can do for how much you can be on your feet or on crutches, etc., or if you need to be sitting, those types of things. And it's the employer's role to determine, can we alter your job, modify your work activity so that you can work safely within those parameters. So we expect you to participate in your medical treatment plan and into return to work options that will modify your job within those doctor's guidelines. If that isn't realistic with your company, we are a co-employer at Pro Resources, and we may find modified work within the community that you live or work or at Pro Resources, especially if it's something that might be more of a long-term restriction. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, it's generally a win-win situation. We work with your medical professional to make sure that those things are appropriate and part of your recovery plan. Again, if that incident happens, and here I'm saying incident versus injury because even if you don't plan to go to the doctor, we need to have those things reported to your supervisor and reported to Pro. Carol is my coworker who handles the work comp claims. Her number there is 218-847-9277, extension 219. The wonder of technology, of course, we can have that message available 24/7, so regardless of the timing, please leave her a message that something has occurred with your name, the company you work for, and just a brief description of what might have happened, and we will get in touch with you and get the necessary details from that. And again, we will need this even if you do not plan to seek medical care at the time. You may change your mind and go in for treatment later. This will document that it was work-related. The other thing that triggers in is an accident investigation for me, and so I can look at documentation, some things that we can do for a preventative perspective. We're not looking at blame or finding any fault, but we're just trying to see if there's anything that we can implement so there's no future injuries from a similar risk. Even if it's something very minor to you, it could be a potential major risk to somebody if that occurs again, and so of course we want to implement anything that we can to prevent a similar incident, and we can only do that by doing an accident investigation, which we can only do after you report it. So please keep us in the loop and inform us of those incidents as well. We have a fraud hotline. Workers' compensation is a benefit for all employees. However, it may be abused out there by some individuals, and of course we want to minimize any fraudulent activity because it's just stealing from the system for those benefits that people do deserve. So there's a toll-free number there. Please call and report any fraudulent activity. Now the rest of my presentation is what's on the Minnesota AWARE program. This is a state mandatory program for safety that employers have to have in place. AWARE stands for a Workplace Accident and Injury Reduction Program, and what it is trying to implement some measures to actually do that, reduce injuries in the workplace so everybody has a safer workplace to be in. These are the elements that are included in the written program, and of course the training is part of that, because if it's a written program on the shelf, that is not going to be effective. So we're going to do the training involving the written program here today. Company policy statement that management is committed to providing a safe and healthy work environment. Training is part of that commitment. Obviously, you're spending time with that today. You will also have the proper equipment, proper time allocation to get the job done. Good communication, as I've already explained with that electrical error case study. And keep in mind that responsibility for safety is under every job description. So regardless of where you work in the company, everyone is responsible for safety, and teamwork is a big part of that safety element as well. When we discussed a good culture, good teamwork just improves safety measures. Procedures have a purpose, and sometimes we can lose sight of that and try to take shortcuts, etc. This is an excellent example of a good outcome from following the proper procedures. It's a construction company. They drive to the job site together in the company truck. They get out and begin to work. The company or the foreman realizes that they're going to be short some nails, and he asks the newest employee to go to the store to get some more nails. He hops in the truck, and then he remembers from his safety orientation that he's supposed to do a circle of safety and walk around the truck. He didn't think it would make any difference. They just pulled up 20 minutes ago, but still he thought he better do as the policy set forth, and he walks around the truck, and this is what he finds on the passenger side. Walking around doing that circle of safety saved this kid's life. If he had driven away, he probably would have thought he'd driven over a board and not even looked back. What is a child doing out on the construction site? That's a great question. We'll probably never find out the answer to that. Had he driven away, it would have been a fluke accident, a very tragic accident. But that's what procedures do. When you follow procedures, you can prevent those tragic accidents. And so that's what we're talking about today, is having policies and procedures in place to help keep you and your coworkers safe. So part of the AWARE program identifies safety and health goals to promote good safety, to promote wellness, how to prevent incidents and accidents, and reduce the costs associated with that. In addition, we identify what your responsibility is, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that safety is all about how you think about what you do more than what you actually do. So think safety and then act safely. Maintain an awareness of your surroundings. Report the unsafe acts, equipment, or conditions, as we've already discussed in that electrical example. And then complying with all the safety rules and regulations. Those are all your responsibilities to maintain a safe work environment. Supervisors have those same responsibilities, plus they have an overall responsibility for those company operations for people on the job site. They are responsible to help enforce the safety rules and enforce compliance. If there is any unsafe actions, etc., they are to facilitate correction of that and help report incidents to management and to Pro Resources so that we can complete an accident investigation and look at promoting and implementing additional prevention measures so that something doesn't happen again in the future. All employees, compliance, compliance, compliance. It really comes down to that, is understanding what the right procedures are, how to operate this piece of equipment, what do I need for my personal protective equipment, and making sure I put it on and put it on appropriately, correctly. Reporting unsafe acts, taking the corrective action, and again, that reporting is so key because we cannot respond to something we're not aware of. So give us that opportunity as management and Pro Resources to make those proper responses. Accountability and enforcement. Again, safety is responsibility of every employee. It's part of every job description and it's part of every performance review. Safety isn't something that, well, I'll spend 5 minutes the first thing when I get to the job and then I'll get all my work done and maybe 5 minutes is the end of the day. Safety is incorporated into all of your job activities, and we want you to be aware and thinking through those activities with safety in mind. There is a list of safety rules that should be posted in your break room or in some common area with your employment. It is part of the AWARE program requesting that an employer do post safety rules. These are not the golden set of rules. That's the end-all of all rules. There's a lot of common sense rules to safety. The premise behind having something posted is simply that reminder. It may be by the water cooler and you go fill up your jug of water, and you may not even realize that you've read some of that, but subliminally it comes in and you just recognize safety. Oh yeah, well, when I go over here, I better do my pre-inspection checklist, or just pay attention to what's going on around me. And you'll just start thinking and being more aware of how to perform your job safely. Minnesota Aware program identifies specific training requirements. Rest assured, I'm not going through all of these today, but I am going to touch base on the majority of them with just an awareness level of the training. You are participating in the new employee training today. The on-the-job training is done by your supervisor or the foreman. I obviously cannot do that sitting here or on your premises to the specific degree that your supervisor can. So that's done supervisor to employee. The other regular safety training, try to do on a periodic basis at your place of employment. We take a look at all of these items and we're going to address them very briefly as it pertains to your company. Hazard assessment and control is simply being aware of your workplace, and it's the responsibility of the supervisors as well as employees to just pay attention to what's going on in the workplace. Has anything changed? Are there additional hazards here? And then the communication of those hazards to the employees. It may simply be, oh, we're taking these rugs out and the floors are going to be waxed tonight, so it's going to be slippery in the morning. So when you come in and you're wiping the snow off your shoes, pay attention. It's going to be slippery. The rug's going to be missing. Something of that nature. It can be very, very basic, very simple, but just having that communication raises somebody's awareness so that they realize, I better not be coming into work at 90 miles an hour walking through the door. I need to walk a little slower. I need to make sure I have appropriate footwear, whatever it might be. So it's your opportunity to identify what's the appropriate PPE. If you're doing a hazard assessment and you're out on a job site, what do you need for PPE? Do you need to have a helmet? Do you need gloves? Do you need steel-toed shoes, good shoes with grips because you're going to be climbing in the rafters? Whatever it is pertaining to that hazard, what do I need to protect myself from that hazard? And that's all a hazard assessment and control is looking at doing, and you just kind of do that on a daily, ongoing basis. Hard hat, part of your PPE. I heard an expression, well, if you have a cheap head, then wear cheap PPE, which would be a baseball cap. If you value your head, then if you're in a hard hat zone, maybe you want to make sure you put on your hard hat so if the hammer falls, it's not going to cause brain damage. I tend to value what's between my ears, and we want to protect that appropriately, and so hopefully you will do the same. Other general PPE, it's anything from head to toes, literally. The hard hats down to the steel-toed boots. Some can be in full aprons, safety glasses, gloves, all of those things. It depends on what your tasks are, respirators, etc. So that is very job site specific. Talk to your supervisor. If you do not feel like you have the appropriate equipment, ask for it from your supervisor. If you have any issues with that or not getting a response that you think is appropriate, by all means just give me a call and I can help facilitate that. It is your employer's responsibility to provide appropriate basic PPE, that personal protective equipment. Another element of the Minnesota Aware program is what's known as the Right to Know law, or the Hazard Communication Standard. The Right to Know law indicates that you have the right to know about chemicals that are in the workplace and what hazards are associated with those chemicals. So you need to be familiar with reading the labels, what's known as MSDS sheets, which is Material Safety Data Sheets, or they're changing that to just simply SDS, Safety Data Sheets, in our global harmonizing system so that worldwide people have access to that same type of information. So that's a whole separate training, but I want you to have on the awareness training level that you have the responsibility to read the labels, know what you're working with, and know what those exposures are to your body in any harmful way, and then how to protect yourself from that. That's the bottom line. Okay, if this is the risk associated with these chemicals, how do I protect myself so that I'm not exposed to that risk, and then taking those appropriate precautions as necessary. Bloodborne pathogen standard, I'm just going to say two things regarding this. One, you may not be in the healthcare industry, but by virtue of somebody opening a box and cutting their hand, you are now exposed to a bloodborne pathogen. So you have the right to protect yourself under universal precautions. The majority of people that would mean using gloves when you render aid. So you have that right to protect yourself and consider all human blood and bodily fluids as if they are infectious, which is universal precautions. Again, you're not in a healthcare facility, but if you're rendering aid to somebody, you need to have that access to gloves in the first aid kit. Another thing I like to point out with that is bloodborne pathogens, the bugs that are in that blood or bodily fluids can live up to a week or more. So even though you've cleaned the area up and a couple days later you realize you missed some spots over along the wall, etc., when you're going to go to clean that up again, use a disinfectant, put your gloves back on, and anytime you are disposing of something with blood or bodily fluids, it should be double bagged just to add extra protection for anybody working with it in the disposal process. Housekeeping. Huge part of safety. I address this in nearly every safety topic that I present on. Everyone is responsible for general housekeeping, and housekeeping helps minimize injuries and incidents. This example here in this photo, tripping over that broom, it would take 5 seconds to pick up that broom and put it away. Because it's laying across the floor and it's a tripping hazard, it could be 6 months for somebody to recover from a torn ACL in the knee or something of that nature. So picking things up, cleaning up spills, even if you were not the one to spill, if you can clean it up. If you cannot take the time to do it when you recognize a spill, identify somebody else to put a cone out there or to ask them to take care of it. We need to make sure that the workplace is clean, picked up, not having slipping and tripping hazards out there. First aid, this is one topic that will be addressed in a separate training presentation. It is too in-depth to go into at this point. You are not required to be the person rendering first aid. Not everybody's comfortable doing that. You should know where the first aid kit is and identify somebody who is a first aid responder or comfortable to provide that first aid. And if you are the first person to witness any incidents and you don't want to be the one rendering aid, let that person know, I'm going to go get help. Somebody will be right with you. That's totally acceptable. Emergency response in the case of fire. Where do I meet if there's a fire alarm that goes off? Of course, we want you to get outside the building, find the closest exit, get outside the building. But that doesn't mean you're going to stay outside that side of the building, because we want you to check in with your supervisor, have a rally point so that they can account for you. So that rally point is key. Talk to your supervisor, identify where that is in your company, and then check in with your supervisor. So if firefighters are coming in on the scene, they can say, is everybody out of the building? And somebody can say, oh, Joe's not here. And the firefighters go in to try to rescue Joe, only to find that Joe's on the other side of the building because he never came around to check in with his supervisor. Firefighters may not be real thrilled with that when they've risked their life to come in and save you. Also, it's the supervisor's responsibility to keep track of who's in the building and who's not. Maybe Joe left to go to a dentist appointment and he's not in the building for that reason. Well, they need to be aware of that so they can report that to the firefighters, and they're not going in to rescue somebody who's not trapped in the building. Also know where a rally point is for tornadoes. You want to have a safe meeting place inside. If the building's not marked as such, then ask your supervisors to identify where is that safe meeting place. You want it to be some interior place away from windows and a strong structure, obviously, to help protect against any tornadic activity. If you do not work in one set building, you're out at different job sites, various places. Generally, you travel in a company vehicle. That is the rally point in the case of any emergency. So you can be accounted for, rally at the company vehicle, and then if it's determined that that's not a safe location at that point, you can relocate to another area after everybody's been accounted for. So the AWARE program is identifying different training elements, different procedures to have in place so that we can have the optimum safe work environment for you. However, having great written programs and safety plans doesn't make any difference if that's just sitting on the shelf. So we just wanted to go through these items with you so that you've got the training and the expectations on what to do regarding safety in the workplace. You always have that right to say, I don't think this is a safe practice. I'm not comfortable doing this task that you're asking me. I don't have enough training to do this task. I'm not familiar with this piece of equipment. You do not have to assume that you know how to operate something. You don't have to pretend or take a risk if you're not comfortable with something regarding safety. You can voice it to your supervisor. If you have any repercussions or concerns about doing that, you can call our office here over at Pro Resources, and we'll help facilitate to make sure that what you are doing on the job is as safe as practically possible, and we can all have a safe and healthy work environment. Part of the training today is to inform employees about this AWARE program, because when OSHA investigators or inspectors are going out to different employer sites, one of the questions they like to ask is, are you aware of the AWARE program? And simply saying, well, it's a safety program, we had some training on it with posting general safety rules and what to do and what not to do. Something that you remember. I don't expect that you're going to be able to quote all of these items, but that if you can give a general response that yes, you are aware of the AWARE program, it has safety elements in it and identifies what the employer responsibilities are regarding safety. That would go a long ways with the inspection. And finally, the AWARE program requires an annual review and annual training, just to refresh your memory as to what's going on with that, to update if there's any changes. So the AWARE program is available in the written format at your company, and if you are working remotely on a frequent basis, then you should have an AWARE program located in your company vehicle. And so you are familiar with where that is in case any OSHA inspector asks for it. So in summary, accidents really can be prevented. Remember, I said the majority of them are caused because people are in a hurry or they're not paying attention. Those are two behavioral things that we can change or address and minimize injuries or eliminate them altogether. So staying alert does help you stay safe. And by the way, this photo is a what not to do type photo. And maybe not the best example of how to think safely, right? You could take out a whole crew with one pop of a hydraulic pressure hose on the way that they have that tractor setting. It's providing them some shade, but they would have been much better to cram into the cab of that tractor and run the air conditioning than to try and sit underneath it and hope that everything holds. So we need to think safety and then act safely. Think through what we're exposing ourselves to or exposing our coworkers to, so that we can all go home at the end of the day. If you are injured, then seek your medical attention as needed, but certainly report it to us, even if you're not going to go to the doctor, so that we can take preventative measures and make sure that it doesn't happen again. We are generally all working so that we can go home to spend time with family and friends and those who are important to us. And so for those who need you tomorrow, we do want you to work safely today.